Well, we talked a little bit about cereal production in the Farm Basics segment, but we have to start out anytime we're talking about cereals with pre-emerge herbicides. This is something that's fairly new for a lot of guys that say, what? You can use a pre in front of wheat? I thought that was just for corn and soybeans and cotton and those kind of crops. No, actually, it's very important in front of wheat. We're going to talk about a couple of options that are really good products, whether you have grass weeds or broadleaf weeds you need to get under control, and how you can just maximize your yield and time when you're producing wheat.
Okay, when we talk about wheat crop, it's basically a grass. And anytime we have a grass crop, it's much more difficult to control grass weeds in there. We've got a lot of options for broadleaf weeds in any grass crops, but in terms of controlling grass in the grass crop, it gets to be a little bit challenging. For years, winter wheat farmers were very concerned about downy brome. Now we have some options there. The spring wheat farmers were concerned about wild oats. We've got some more options there. And one of the products that a farmer can use pre-emerge that has activity on both wild oats and downy brome is Prepare. Now Prepare has the same active ingredient as Everest 2.0. It's an ALS product, but don't get too alarmed because we don't have a lot of grass weeds at this point that are resistant to ALS herbicides. But anyway, you go out there with this Prepare early on, pre-emerge, and you're going to get at least good suppression on wild oats, on downy brome, and on the foxtails. So then later on, your post-emerge grass herbicide doesn't have to do as much work.
Well, the thing I like, Brian, is when we're thinking about Prepare as an ALS product, for a lot of guys, they're using post-emerge products like Axial, for example. It's an ACC-ACE inhibitor. So it's a different mode of action. So now we've got two different modes of action going out there against our grasses. And this is really important because we're seeing some ACC-ACE resistance spreading in wheat growing areas. So it's nice having that ALS herbicide in there as well, so we take two shots at the grasses. But the other thing that I'd say is this: when it comes to any of the pre-emerge herbicides, you have to have the proper expectations. When we're looking at corn and soybean production, guys have been using pre's in there for years, and they understand it's not going to be the only herbicide treatment I do all year. This is going to stop most of those early weeds. There will be a flush that comes later, and I'll need to spray post-emerge. But the good thing about my post-spray is I won't have really thick weeds out in the field like I would where I didn't use that pre.
Okay, here's the good and the bad with Prepare. It has more activity in higher pH ground. So if you have a soil pH that's consistently 7 or over, a lot of times you can get by as a farmer with 0.2 ounces per acre, and you can get the same effectiveness as the farmer who's got a, let's say, 6.0 pH using a 0.3 ounce per acre rate. So this is one of the things we want you to be thinking about, and a lot of farmers get concerned when they have the higher pH soil. They don't want the 0.3 ounces, the full rate, to do any damage to their wheat, so they'll just automatically cut back to that 0.2 ounces, and the 0.2 only costs about $4 an acre, 0.3 costs about $6 an acre, so there's not a huge cost difference there. It's more an issue of crop safety, and just the fact of the matter is we can get the same performance in that higher pH ground with the lower rate.
Well, the other thing with Prepare that I'd like to mention is you can mix it certainly with a Roundup burn down. You're going to have some good residual out of that product. It doesn't have to be tilled in or anything like that. It can be used in a no-till situation, which is really good. And when we're putting it out in that kind of situation, whether you mix the Roundup with it or not, it's going to have some activity on broadleaf weeds, but that Roundup really helps pick up the ALS resistant weeds and broadens the spectrum of the weeds you're going to control. So you can do okay on mustards and a few other species of weeds that could be important on your farm, but when you've got things like ALS resistant kochia, you're going to need that Roundup in the mix to try and wipe those weeds out too.
Okay, so even though grasses are a much bigger problem in wheat than broadleaves, there are still some farmers that are having issues with broadleaves in wheat, and they want something pre-emerge that'll do great on broadleaves. Well, there is a product now. We never used to have this option, but just in the last few years, Kicksor came out. Well, the actual name for Kicksor, the product, is Sharpen. So farmers are using Sharpen now pre-emerge in wheat. And the advantage to using it in wheat as opposed to soybeans, for example, you can only use 1 ounce in front of soybeans, otherwise you're going to get damage to the soybean field. Well, with wheat, you can use 2 or 3 ounces per acre. Now, it does get more expensive when you're using 2 or 3 ounces, but your broadleaf control is going to be excellent in many cases. It's not going to get every single broadleaf out there, but it's certainly going to get most of the broadleaves, at least using 2 ounces, if not even going all the way to 3 ounces.
Well, what I like when we were talking about the green bridge earlier in the show is you can use something like Sharpen Sharpen, it is a very, very fast burn down product. I mean, when you're spraying Sharpen out there and you're putting some MSO with it, you can certainly mix some Roundup in there to pick up grasses as well. It's gonna burn weeds down basically in 1 or 2 days at 2 ounces. You're just gonna fry weeds quickly. And a lot of guys like that when they're thinking, I wanna make sure I have at least a couple of weeks that I'm eliminating this green bridge. Sharpen's a great way that, boom, I spray, the weeds are gone, and I feel really comfortable about that. So Sharpen is an excellent burn down product. Again, as Brian was mentioning, its control is on broadleaf weeds. So you're going to need the Roundup in there to pick up some grasses, which is very important going into cereal production. But I really like the residual control at 2 ounces of Sharpen. We're gonna see broadleaf weed control pretty good for at least a couple of weeks into the crop. We let the wheat get up, we get a nice stand established without a lot of competition from these big broadleaves, and that's gonna be a good thing for you going into next season.
Yeah, but if I'm spending the money on the 2 ounce rate, it's like $10 an acre. I'm gonna have, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks worth of residual. 2 weeks, I think it's gonna be way more than that, especially when you're putting it out in the fall. In fact, I'll even see a little bit of residual control all the way until the spring. Again, you know, not everybody has this issue with broadleaves in wheat, but if you do, Sharpen's a great option.
Well, we highlighted 2 products that you could use pre-emerge, and we really like those because neither one of them we really want to use post-emerge. Again, as Brian was saying, Prepare, it is the same active ingredient that's in Everest 2.0, but it doesn't have the crop safener. So we don't want to use the Prepare post-emerge if we don't have to. And also with the Sharpen, that has to be done before the crop is up. Now there's another option, Valor, that could be used. It's got a 30-day window where you have to put it out 30 days ahead of when you're going to plant wheat.
So in other words, you're not going to use it in front of wheat.
We've seen some injury that way before, especially in areas that don't get much rainfall.
Yep.
So we're kind of concerned about that. We'd much rather use the Sharpen where we're not worried about injuring the wheat.
The other thing is some farmers will talk about using Maverick, Olympus, or PowerFlex pre-emerge. You can do that, but we'd rather see you save that for post-emerge use because you're only going to use that one time per season. We'd like to start out with Prepare or Sharpen, then follow with the Maverick, Olympus, or PowerFlex if necessary a little bit later on, so you have another shot. All 3 of those products are definitely going to be better on downy brome, so in winter wheat, PowerFlex, Olympus, and Maverick are great options.
Well, when it comes to our Weed of the Week, it's going to take something pretty strong. This weed's tough. Have you identified this week's Weed of the Week?